Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents See No Evil by Pippa Dacosta, narrated by Paul Woodson. Chapter 1. Do you know what paradise looks like? For some, they find it in their child's smile. For others, it's a road trip from coast to coast with no strings attached and no commitments. For me, it's a beer in one hand, an empty beach, and a star-scattered sky. I didn't know what time it was. The weekdays had blurred into the weekend, and I didn't give a damn about any of it. When the breeze changed, it brought with it the chatter and music from a nearby bar. When it switched back again, the ebb and flow of waves washed the sounds of life away. The ocean, the sky, they were timeless. No gods, no magic, no prophecies, no bullshit. I could get used to this. I raised the condensation-drenched bottle to my lips and took a drink. But like all good things, it would come to an end. Someone approached, making an effort to be heard. Only Cat had to deliberately make sound as she walked. Her default state was stealth, and her favorite pastime was sneaking up on me and standing close enough to let me know she could have severed my spine with her claws before I could utter a spell word to stop her. She dropped into a sitting position on the lounger beside mine, draped her arms over her knees, and stared in that way she did, unblinking and judging, as though she saw into my soul and found me decidedly uninspiring. I'd pinned my gaze way out at sea where the moon was spilling its milky light across the black. This was my moment, and I sure as souls wouldn't let her stare my relaxed state of mind out of me. She could sit like that till dawn, for all I cared. I'd earned some peace. "You turned off your cell," she finally said. I hadn't noticed her faint Boston accent until a few weeks ago, after she'd settled into her role as consultant, assistant, spy. It was an old accent, probably left over from her childhood, and it only came out to play when she was pissed, like now. "Did I? You brought us all the way out here for a—" she hooked her fingers into air quotes, "vacation, and then you're never around?" I side-eyed her and took another swig of beer. You know, most folks would appreciate a week in the Hamptons. You might have Shukra fooled, but not me. Cat was as sharp as her claws. She'd also spent 3 months watching me from the top shelf in my office, hidden inside her 4-legged house cat alter ego as she learned everything she could about me, before revealing herself as a person and saving my ass from some priests in the process. Not even Shu had spent that long in my presence, and Shu and I were soul-bound. "Where's Shu?" I asked. "In the hotel casino. Don't change the subject." Shukra in a casino? Odds were she wasn't playing fair. After another swig of beer, I turned my head and looked at Cat, and I mean really looked, taking the time to absorb her appearance. She wore tight khakis and a loose-fitting sleeveless V-neck top, displaying the type of toned physique shopping channels employed to sell the latest fad in get-fit-quick equipment. I'd seen her in action, and those muscles weren't for show. I suspected she kept her blonde hair cropped short purely to reduce the chances of an opponent grabbing it in a fight. When attacked, she fought back quick and dirty and with vicious efficiency. She was a killer. The goddess Bastet had trained her that way. "Is that a hickey?" she asked. In the low light I could just make out where Cat's gaze had landed, and with it came the memory of Bethany Jane, the woman who'd finished her bar shift a few hours ago and whose apartment I'd left right before taking up my quiet spot on the beach. My lips twitched around a smile. "Like I said, vacation." "What are you, 18? Oh, disgust. She didn't approve of my choices, which was why my new favorite pastime was rubbing her nose in them. There's nothing wrong with 2 consenting adults enjoying themselves. You should try it sometime. Or do you prefer shaking your tail at local strays?" She barely reacted. My feline quips never got a rise out of her, but that didn't stop me from trying. "Do you know what Amit gave me for my 18th birthday?" I asked. Her brow rose at the mention of my surrogate mother, the Pantheon's boogeyman. Or should that be Boogie Woman? Technically, Amit had been more crocodile than person and more drill sergeant than mother. I don't think I want to know, Kat grumbled. She gave me Ramses's daughter. Recognize the name, Ramses? A few pharaohs went by that name, she replied decisively. I wasn't sure how much she knew about the old ways, but I assumed Bastet had taught her the basics. This was the third one. He had 12 bastard children that the Pantheon knew of. Not the kindest of pharaohs, but few were besides Hatshepsut. My mind briefly wandered until Kat's edged gaze drew me back. I drew in a deep breath, bringing with it the briny taste of ocean air and damp sand. I doubt Ramses noticed the girl was gone. She died of a snake bite, I think, but the how isn't important. After her soul arrived in Duat, Amit made her flesh for 14 nights and bound her to my service. My mother expected me to use her as a slave in every way. The girl, finding herself in the underworld surrounded by the dead, was terrified. Kat's eyes widened. She didn't like where this story was going. Her mind was already concocting the awful deeds I had probably committed. She'd seen me lose control. She knew just a fraction of what I was capable of. She might have even heard of my underworld crimes. But whatever Kat was imagining, she was wrong. I showed her the River of Souls and the halls. In the waning light, the mare, the place of ascension, you'd know them as pyramids, shine like they're lit from inside. I took her to the weighing chambers and guided her through Duat, the underworld city in all its terrible glory. We walked through the gardens of Adam, and she picked a date from the Tree of Life. Osiris's tree, of course. Everything there is Osiris's. I upended the beer bottle and drank down the remnants. Her name was Anexi. A lovely name. It was. I remembered how it had sounded as I whispered it against Anexi's lips. It means belonging to me. Amit probably thought she was fulfilling the girl's fate by cursing her into my service. After a few moments filled with the sound of waves and little else, Kat asked, "What happened?" "Why should anything have happened?" I asked, bowing my head to hide my smirk. Kat was intrigued, curious, some might say. I had a whole bunch of curious cat quips I'd been waiting to dust off, but she frowned and spoke before I got the chance. "You said Amit only gave her to you for 14 nights. What happened after that?" "It was a long time ago." She shifted closer. "You don't remember?" "I remember." I dragged a hand across my chin and scratched at my bristly cheek. Anexi happened so long ago that the story might as well have been a myth written on curling papyrus for all it meant to me today. And yet a little something fluttered inside. A tiny stutter of emotion left over from another time, another place, another me. 18 and presiding over the halls of judgment alongside Amit, I was an epic asshole. I waited for Kat to say I hadn't changed, and then remembered she wasn't Shu. Her green eyes searched my face, and the sadness in them told me she'd already jumped to the end, guessing the outcome. That was the problem with immortality. The past was paved with the dead. I didn't know it at the time, but Anexi was my first naive and foolish love. And I had loved the girl as much as my soul-eater heart had allowed. I devoured her soul. Kat recoiled, knowing what that meant. I hadn't just killed Anexi. I'd destroyed her and any chance she'd had at paradise in the afterlife, or being reincarnated. Souls are eternal, as long as they avoid soul-eaters. "Why?" Kat whispered. After our 14 nights, Amit summoned Anexi's soul to the halls of judgment. Anubis, curious son of a jackal that he is, was there. Half of Duat had gathered, so intrigued by the soul who'd captured the soul-eater's eye. In Osiris's absence, and after I'd refused to, Amit weighed Anexi's heart against the feather of truth. By the gods, why was I dredging this up? It had started as a way to unsettle Kat, but I'd fallen into my own trap. This was what happened when I indulged in too much alone time. My little smile had long since died out, and I struggled to keep the corners of my lips from turning down. When Anexi was 16, a man attacked her in the streets of Wasset, robbed and beat her. Her life might have ended right there, but she was a brave girl. With the bone knife she carried, she fought the thief off. Had she run, she would have lived, and her soul would have been lighter for it. But she didn't run. She had a fire in her, a fierce anger. She cut her attacker's throat and stabbed him in the chest 8 times. "You knew. Is that why you refused to weigh her?" She confessed to her sin and begged me to keep her from the weighing chambers. I couldn't save her. "Ace, Kat's voice caught. I waved her concern away. This was forever ago. I barely recognized it as my story. I swung my legs off the lounger and leaned forward, facing Kat's shining eyes. Anexi was already mine. Amit had seen to that. I devoured her because it had to happen. She stood in front of the crowd, head up and shoulders back, and she looked her fate, me, in the eyes. She had a warrior's soul. Kat licked her lips and tried again. "I don't know what to say." "You remind me of her." I gestured roughly in her direction. "Not the face, but the spirit. In the same situation, you would have cut the guy in two." She blinked, her lips slightly parted and her expression the most confused I'd seen it. "Is my soul damned?" I smiled, enjoying seeing her fumble for a response. I could let her sweat. Another me might have. But lately I'd been trying good on for size. "I've seen your soul, briefly," I added, after her whole body had tensed to either attack or defend. "I've also seen you kill, but you did so for the right reasons. What I saw in you was light. You're a good person beneath all your homicidal tendencies. You've struggled with your moral compass in the past, but it's steered you right so far." "You saw all that?" She laughed a little nervous laugh. I'd thrown her off her stride. I'd have to remember that and try it again. We had a few days left in our vacation. I could fill the time by making the warrior cat squirm, especially if she insisted on tracking me down and crashing my alone time. "You know," she looked out at the ocean, throwing her face into profile, "I think the housekeepers are trying to summon a demon. I'm pretty sure I heard chanting coming from the room next door last night." Changing the subject. I'd shaken her all right, and considering the weird little ache inside, I'd unsettled part of me, too. When too many memories vied for attention, they each stirred the other, lifting old emotions to the surface. Screw that. I needed another beer. "They can go right ahead." I scooped up my empty beer bottle, got to my feet, and started back up the beach. I'm not on the job. Unless locusts start raining from the sky or some asshole parts the Atlantic, I couldn't care less. "Ace." I stopped and glanced back. She was still sitting on the lounger, looking at me like I was the mystery here, not her reasons for sticking closer to me than my shadow. "Are we hiding? This place, this vacation. In 6 months you never once took a day off. Stop looking for trouble. And enjoy your vacation while you can." I saluted her with the empty bottle and trudged up the beach. Like I'd said, Kat was sharp, and absolutely right. I may have neglected to mention the warning I'd received from a few underworld contacts, or the whispers from concerned clients. Anubis had waited long enough for me to come to him. His jackals were on the offensive, and I was hiding under a resort-shaped rock until I figured out how to survive the god of the damned and the shitstorm he was stirring up in the underworld. Add to that my newfound notoriety as the god killer, and suddenly the Pantheon's spotlight was right over me. "Did you feel that?" The tight note of concern in Kat's voice halted my steps. The breeze continued tossing the bar sounds of laughter and chinking glasses around the beach, but I couldn't feel much of anything beyond the mild sense of contentment brought on by the beer and Bethany Jane's company. "I swear A tremble shifted the sand beneath my boots. Kat shot to her feet and looked down. "Earthquake?" she asked, looking to me for answers. It wasn't an earthquake. I scanned the length of the beach. Stark white loungers tracked left and right. Lights from the hotels and beachfront homes illuminated the sand, stretching long shadow fingers toward the surf. But there was nothing ominous beyond the absence of people. The sand around my boots rippled, sucking me down an inch. Oh, no. Get off the sand! I bolted for Kat. Eyes wide, she looked down. All around her the gray sand rose and fell in a slow, undulating wave. She lifted a foot. What the? I caught her arm and yanked her onto the lounger behind me. The damn thing rocked, threatening to topple us over. Get off the sand means get off the damned sand. Kat bumped against my shoulder, knocking me sideways. I gave her a shove while trying to maintain some balance, but the seat rocked the other way and tipped like a boat. Kat dropped a foot over the side to stop her fall, and a fleshy, wrinkled tentacle shot out whip-quick, snagged her ankle, and yanked. She staggered, teetering on the edge of the warped lounger. Hold on! I hooked an arm around her waist and pivoted, pulling her back. The tentacle knotted tighter, its thick skin creaking. Magic burned the air, a quick blast I recognized as Kat's natural shifter talent. She twisted, and her claws, sharp and precise as daggers, caught the light. Too late, I recognized her intention. Don't! She sliced through the tentacle, cutting clean through it, and then kicked the flaccid appendage off her shoe. What the hell was that? Kat panted. A verk, and you just pissed it off. She looked at me blankly. What's a verk? A mound of sand swelled a few feet away, rising up higher and higher until it blotted out the starlight. Sand poured down the creature's sides, revealing a snake-like body minus the scales. It opened its massive, circular mouth. Countless lashing tentacles spewed from its cavernous throat, and the verk loosed a thunderous roar. So much for paradise. Run! Chapter 2. We ran. Fine, dry sand sucked on my boots, draining my speed so that every stride took twice as long. I chanced to look back, expecting to see the verk chasing us, but I couldn't see it in the dark. It was with us, though, traveling beneath the sand. We gotta get off the beach. Where is it? Kat slowed, frantically looking around. A tentacle exploded out of the sand. Kat veered away from it toward me, the both of us still running. I snagged her arm and yanked her back, just as the pincers at the end of the tentacle snapped together where her head had been. She picked up speed, legs pumping. Can't you spell word it? They're deaf. A depression in the sand nearly sent me sprawling. The verk's cry thundered across the beach again, sending a fresh blast of adrenaline surging through my veins. If we reached the asphalt, the verk wouldn't follow. Maybe. What the hell did I know? It wasn't like we had roads on the plains of Mumoka. Verks shied away from civilization, all except this one, which was rampaging on a Long Island beach because I couldn't catch a gods-be-damned break. Behind us, the clatter and splinter of plastic loungers raced closer. I didn't need to look to know the verk was tunneling through the sand at the speed a man could run. In the deep sand, Kat and I were barely jogging. It would catch us. Kat stumbled. Her hands shot out to cushion the fall, but momentum carried her forward. I snagged her clawed fingers just as an explosion of tentacles wrapped around her waist and knotted tight. Her razor-edged nails sliced through my fingertips. Damn it, no! Kat's hand slipped from my grip. The verk reared up, lifting Kat high off her feet. Ace! The more tentacles the verk threw out, the more Kat twisted and bucked, claws slicing. 1/5 the verk's size? She couldn't win. Purst! I flung the word, and it instantly rebounded, lashing through my skull like the crack of a whip. Do something! Kat shrieked. There was nothing nearby but broken loungers. I couldn't even yank out the verk's soul. It didn't have eyes. More fleshy, writhing tentacles tangled around Kat's torso. She kicked and sliced at the fat loops under her arms, but the verk lifted her higher, lining her up with its gaping mouth. I needed Alistair. Don't shift, you'll make it angry. Are you fucking kidding me? Hang on, I'll be right back. I was already running for the hotel bar when I heard, "You're leaving? You son of—" But the Verk's belly snarls drowned out the rest. The hotel foyer blurred by. Not bothering with the elevator, I slammed through the stairwell doors and took the steps 3 at a time. I had the hotel keycard out and skidded to a stop against my door, jamming the card into its slot. The little light blinked red. I jabbed the card in again. It flashed red, red, red. "Cookummed," I snarled. The door didn't budge. I backed up, braced, and kicked the lock. The door sprang open. Scooting low, I snatched Alistair from beneath the bed. The familiar tingle scattered through my fingers. The sword and I had some making up to do. I hadn't wielded it since I'd technically killed Thoth. A rampaging Verk was as good a reason as any to put our grievances aside. I pulled Alistair free of its scabbard as horrified screams came from the open window. Not good. Screams meant witnesses. Witnesses meant video footage, news reports, cops, and Osiris. A quick check out the window confirmed tourists were streaming out the hotel lobby into the parking lot. Apparently Verks didn't mind public appearances at expensive hotels. Who knew? Returning to the lobby, I fought against the flow of scattering guests, Alistair aglow in my hand. The situation was still salvageable, if I could minimize the number of eyewitnesses, but I needed to contain the Verk, and now. The Verk had wallowed its way into the valet parking bay right outside the all-glass front door. Slower moving on asphalt, its fat body prevented it from wriggling through the revolving doors, but that didn't stop it from trying, much to the horror of the people trapped inside. This was rapidly turning into one of those nuke-it-all-from-orbit type of situations. In other words, call in Osiris. The lobby behind me was clear, except for a rent-a-cop trying to manually override the seized door. I sauntered up behind him and eyed the heaving mass of underworld grub through the glass. The 5 trapped folks banging on the glass, screaming and clawing and begging for help. Rent-a-cop freed his gun and stepped back, about to shoot the glass out, but then he saw me in my coat. After he'd clocked the sword, he hesitated. Who was more dangerous, the giant worm or the nonchalant guy with a glowing sword? Before we had time for proper introductions, the Verk slammed its bulk into the doors, cracking the entire wall and setting off the tourists inside the glass carousel. "Fire top right," I told the civilian cop. The doors were composed of safety glass, same as a car windshield. A gunshot in the right spot would shatter it into harmless fragments. "Get ready to guide these people to the back and find another exit. No heroics." With no better option, Rent-a-cop fired top right. The glass exploded, and people spilled out of their trap, falling over each other in their haste. The Verk must have felt the vibrations, because its tentacles swarmed in through the door, followed by its tunnel-like mouth. One of those tentacles had knotted around the broken remains of a lounger. But no cat. When it tried to shove its rippling, desiccated body through, it tore out the doorframe. "She'd better be alive, you overgrown earthworm." I reversed my grip on Alistair and pushed off my back foot, coming in low and fast. The Verk swung its vast head toward the fleeing people. Its long body slithered forward across the polished lobby floor, exposing its flank. I thrust Alistair toward its flesh and yanked upward, expecting the tapered point to sink into the Verk's guts, cutting the beast wide open. But Alistair glanced off as if the grub were made of granite. Momentum carried me forward, and I fell against the Verk's bark-like skin. Its undulating muscles shifted beneath my shoulder, and its ugly, eyeless head swung around 90 degrees, coming for me. The pincer-tipped tentacles lashed out, whipping and snapping inches from my face. Iron for skin. Great. I arced Alistair back, slicing through the lashing tentacles. The Verk let out a god's-awful noise, low and loud enough to rattle the hotel and tremble through my ageless soul, reminding me that neither of us had any right to be here. More tentacles struck out. I cut them down and pressed in closer, hacking at the wriggling appendages. Up close, the thing's stench caused my eyes to water and burned like acid on my tongue. When I got within striking distance, the Verk lifted its head high and screeched loud enough for all of Long Island to hear. It craned over me, its tentacles now thrashing stumps inside its mouth. Blood and mucus rained over me and splashed up the walls and across the floor, turning the lobby into a slaughterhouse of sand and excretions. I officially classified this as a monumental fuck-up. This ends now. I braced Alistair against the floor, razor-edged tip pointed up. This would either hurt like someone had dropped 20,000 pounds of worm on me, or it would all be over and I'd be grabbing another beer for the road. The Verk fell forward, coming in for the kill. Gripping Alistair in both hands, I crouched and braced for the worst. It hit. The sword sang in my hands, and a blast of hot sand smashed over me. A sudden numbing stillness flooded in, the type that often lands right after chaos and makes you wonder how you're still alive. I blinked sand out of my eyes and coughed, spitting more sand to the side. The Verk had vanished. The lobby looked like a hurricane had blown through, dumping the beach inside the hotel, which was probably the best explanation I could come up with. And there, half buried in the sand, lay Cat. I dropped to my knees and pressed my fingers to her neck. Her pulse beat against my touch, strong and healthy. "Hey, Cat?" Any second now the cops would pile in. Someone with a cell phone would snap pictures and upload them to social media. I couldn't risk the heat. Tucking Alistair under my arm, I scooped up Cat, threw her over my shoulder, and headed for the stairs. She murmured something I didn't catch. "I got you," I replied. People would ask questions, but without a Verk carcass, the cops would have a hard time believing a giant worm had crashed into the hotel. I'd probably have to call Osiris up here to charm the witnesses into silence. He could also dislodge a few memories from any security camera operators while here. As for the off-site data centers, Osiris had people who dealt with that, but all that would come later. Right now, all I cared about was getting my crew and me as far from the beach as possible. Back in my room, a silently fuming Shukra greeted me. Her smile was a deadly slash of red lipstick, and those tumultuous eyes swirled with a touch of purple. She looked like a storm in a pantsuit, and was clearly about to launch into a spectacular tirade, until the sight of Cat draped over my shoulder dampened her fury. "We need to get out of here." I dumped Cat on the bed and heard the shifter grumble something suspiciously insult-like in my direction. "Go pack your stuff," I told Shu. What happened? A Verk happened. Shukra immediately moved to the bedside and placed her hand over Cat's closed eyes, whispering a few quick words. "She's unharmed." Shukra fixed her dark eyes on me. "What by Osiris's balls is a Verk doing here?" The accusation was so thick it struck me like a physical blow. Of course a rampaging Verk was my fault. I'd have given her an innocent look had I remembered what innocent looked like. The fine beaches and fancy cocktails? Shu stabbed a sharp fingernail in my direction, punctuating her words. "You lied," omitted some truths. "That didn't wash 5 centuries ago, and it doesn't wash now." I'd deliberately taken Shukra out of New York to avoid all this. Well, technically, I'd left New York to avoid all this. Shu didn't have a choice but to follow. And Cat had followed because she wanted to tag along, and there was no point in telling a cat not to do something. In my hurry, I'd neglected the fact that the problem wasn't New York. It was me. My plan to hide in the Hamptons hadn't been a plan at all, and it could have gotten Cat killed. With Cat's murmurs becoming more insistent, I left the sword on the bed, moved to the window, and spotted a trail of blue and white flashing lights moving in from the main stretch of road. Fantastic. All we needed now was the local news crew, and we'd have a full house. This would take some creative omissions. Were the walls closing in? The White Mountains were close. I'd heard New England was nice this time of year. "We're not getting any younger," Shu growled. Literally. She'd been doing more of that lately, as though she'd found some wiggle room in the human prison Osiris had trapped her demon self in. Half the Pantheon wanted me dead.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?